Today, I want to talk about learning and making money. And let me start with a question that might sting a little. Did you also grow up believing that if you got a good education, stacked a few impressive certifications, and kept grinding long enough, money would naturally move closer to you? Because that's what a lot of people believe. Study hard, get the degree, build the resume, collect the credentials, be responsible, be disciplined, be patient. And then one day, supposedly, the money shows up. But real life doesn't always work like that. You've probably seen people spend 15 or 20 years doing everything right, only to end up financially stuck. And then you see somebody else catch the right business trend, launch the right offer, start the right side hustle, or jump into the right market at the right time. And in a year, they make more money than the perfect student has made in years. That doesn't mean education is useless. It means a lot of people were taught the wrong relationship between learning and money. Because the fastest way to grow is not just to keep studying. The fastest way to grow is to study how money is made. That's the part nobody says out loud. A lot of people think growth means nonstop learning. They think the more degrees they earn, the more courses they buy, the more books they finish, the closer they get to financial freedom. But that belief falls apart the second real life hits. Yes, learning matters. Of course it matters. But what you learn matters more than how much you learn. If you spend years learning things that never turn into income, then a lot of what you're calling growth is really just a beautifully decorated form of self-deception. You're putting in effort, you're staying busy, you feel productive, you feel intelligent, you feel like you're building a better future. But if none of that knowledge can solve a real problem for real people in a way they'll pay for, then financially, you may just be running in place. And that's how a lot of smart people get trapped. They become extremely good at doing assigned tasks, following systems, and performing well inside somebody else's structure. They learn how to be valuable enough to keep, reliable enough to promote, skilled enough to depend on. And eventually, they become what the system loves most, a very polished, very capable, very replaceable part, a high-performing screw in a giant machine. That's why learning and making money are not the same thing. You can spend your whole life believing that knowledge automatically turns into wealth, but it doesn't. You can memorize 1,000 ideas about success and still never turn one of them into cash flow. You can't pull gold out of a book just because somebody told you there's treasure in knowledge. So why do two people with similar backgrounds end up in completely different financial realities? Why does one person build wealth while another barely stays afloat? At the core of it, most people misunderstand what money actually is. Take employment, for example. A lot of people say, "My employer pays for my time." Not really. That sounds nice. It sounds philosophical. It sounds anti-corporate and emotionally satisfying. But it's incomplete. Companies are not paying you for time in the abstract. They are paying for useful output. If you show up for 8 hours but create nothing meaningful, solve nothing important, improve nothing measurable, and help produce no result that matters, then your time alone has very little value in the market. Money does not reward time by itself. Money rewards outcomes that other people can use. That's a brutal truth, but it's also a freeing one. Because once you understand that, your whole view of work changes. Your paycheck is not a reward for existing at your desk. It's your share of the value created by your labor, filtered through the company, the market, the business model, the leadership team, the expenses, and the profit structure. You take your energy, attention, problem-solving ability, and skill, and you turn them into an output. The company takes that output and tries to convert it into revenue. Then, after layers of distribution, you get paid. Then what do most people do? They spend that money to recover from the stress required to earn it. They buy convenience, entertainment, escapes, small rewards, lifestyle upgrades, quick relief. And just like that, the cycle repeats. Work, earn, recover, spend, work again. That's why understanding how much your output is actually worth matters so much. Because once you see that clearly, you stop romanticizing effort and start evaluating value. And value usually comes down to two things: product strength and competitive strength. In plain English, how well does what you do solve someone's problem? And how hard are you to replace? That's it. If your work solves a painful problem, creates a clear result, saves time, makes money, reduces risk, or satisfies a deep demand, your value goes up. If you can do that in a way that's rare, differentiated, faster, more persuasive, or more effective than most other people, your value goes up even more. That's how money works. Not through hope, not through moral purity, not through academic symbolism, through market value. And once you see that, you can start talking honestly about how people actually grow faster. The first real accelerator is this. The fastest way to make money is to be willing to test, fail, and test again. In other words, to be willing to try. That sounds simple, but most people never do it. They stay in preparation mode forever. They keep learning, keep planning, keep consuming content, keep organizing notes, keep telling themselves they're not ready yet. But often, not ready is just fear wearing a respectable outfit. A lot of people study hard, but they never build the courage to let reality judge their ideas. So they stay safe. And that safety quietly makes them poorer. Because here's the truth. In today's world, formal education is not your main competitive edge anymore. That doesn't mean education has no value. It means everybody already knows education matters. So education by itself stopped being special. What matters now is whether you can turn what you know into something the market wants. Knowledge that can't be applied becomes intellectual furniture. It sits there and makes you feel sophisticated, but it doesn't move your life forward. And the moment you actually try to make money, you start learning things no classroom can fully teach you. You learn how people behave when real dollars are involved. You learn what catches attention and what gets ignored. You learn that demand matters more than your personal taste. You learn that people don't buy what's technically best. They buy what feels useful, urgent, clear, emotional, credible, and worth the trade-off. You learn timing. You learn positioning. You learn human psychology. You learn leverage. You learn how fragile confidence is when there's risk attached. And most importantly, you learn where your illusions were. That's why you'll often see successful business people speaking at universities, but you rarely see lifetime academics dropped into the middle of a market and suddenly outperforming experienced operators. Because some truths only show up after you've been hit by reality. Some answers don't live in theory. They live in the mistakes you paid for. That's why trying to make money forces a growth mindset in a way passive learning never can. If you're really in the game, you can't hide. If you launch a product and nobody buys, that's feedback. If you start a YouTube channel and nobody watches, that's feedback. If you offer freelance services and nobody responds, that's feedback. If your online store gets traffic but no conversions, that's feedback. Painful, yes. Personal, sometimes. But still feedback. And people who grow fast don't treat feedback like an insult. They treat it like data. That's one of the biggest differences between people who keep leveling up and people who stay stuck. The stuck person takes failure as identity. The growing person takes failure as instruction. One says, "This means I'm not good enough." The other says, "This means I need to adjust the offer, the message, the skill, the audience, or the system." That mental difference changes everything. And then there's the action side. A true growth mindset is not just positive thinking. It's not posting motivational quotes. It's not pretending every setback is magical. It's much more practical than that. It means staying locked on the target and continuing to move. Say you want to make money with short-form video. You post consistently, but nothing takes off. What do? If you're serious, you study retention. You study hooks. You study packaging. You study titles, thumbnails, platform behavior, audience, emotion, pacing, and curiosity. If you want to run an e-commerce store and your products don't sell, what do? You study traffic, conversion rate, customer objections, landing page clarity, offer structure, pricing, product positioning, and creative testing. If you want to freelance and clients ignore you, what do? You study sales messaging, outreach, proof, niche selection, framing, and the specific result clients are actually paying for. Notice the pattern. Money forces useful learning. It forces targeted learning. It forces learning tied to outcomes. And every time you solve one of those problems, you become stronger than you were yesterday. That's real growth, not abstract growth, paid growth. Now let's go deeper, because this is where most people still get confused. Making money doesn't just help you earn. It helps you see the truth about how the world works. A lot of people spend years learning theories and still misunderstand reality. They believe hard work alone guarantees success. They believe income is mostly determined by credentials. They believe fairness drives financial outcomes. They believe being good at your job automatically leads to wealth. But the market is not a morality machine. It doesn't pay based on who deserves it most. It pays based on value, leverage, scarcity, distribution, timing, and demand. Here's a simple example. Imagine two software developers. The first one is technically strong, great coder, reliable employee, makes maybe $110,000 a year at a stable company and feels pretty good about it. The second developer also knows how to code, but starts thinking differently. He learns how to find clients, package solutions, build simple products, maybe create a niche SaaS tool, maybe teach online, maybe build an audience, maybe consult for small businesses that don't understand tech but desperately need results. 2 years later, that second person is making several $100,000 a year. What's the difference? It's not that one person worked harder in some moral sense. It's not that one person was a better human being. The difference is that one stayed inside the company's loop and the other started thinking in terms of the market. One sold labor. The other learned how to sell outcomes. One relied on a boss to define value. The other learned how to identify demand directly. That is a completely different game. And once you understand that, a lot of traditional advice starts sounding incomplete. Just work hard. At what? For the right company. Doing what? Build skills. Which skills? Skills for status or skills that solve expensive problems? This is why direction matters so much more than blind effort. You can climb very fast in the wrong direction. You can get more efficient at a path that still leaves you broke. You can become world-class at something with almost no economic demand. And that's a terrifying realization for people who are trained to value effort above outcomes. Now, none of this means you should stop learning. It means you should learn with economic intention. So how do you use money thinking to accelerate growth? Start with this formula. Find the right model, imitate intelligently, then optimize. That's how most real progress happens. First, learn skills that can be exchanged for money directly. If your immediate goal is to improve your financial life, stop prioritizing skills just because they sound impressive. Prioritize skills that map clearly to income. Sales, copywriting, marketing, content creation, editing, closing, lead generation, offer creation, negotiation, design that increases conversion, operations that save time, AI implementation for business workflows, anything that helps a person or a company make money, save time, reduce stress, or improve performance. That's the zone. This doesn't mean other subjects have no value. Philosophy has value. History has value. Literature has value. But if you're financially struggling, you need to be honest about sequence. You can study beautiful things later. First, build economic stability. A lot of people reverse that order and then wonder why they feel intellectually rich but financially trapped. Second, spend as little as possible to test the market. This is where people sabotage themselves. They think they need the perfect logo, the perfect website, the perfect business plan, the perfect camera, the perfect equipment, the perfect certification, the perfect moment. No. The market does not care how ready you feel. The market cares whether the offer works. So if you want to start a small business, don't begin by spending $15,000 building a fantasy. Run a simple test. Want to sell baked goods? Start with weekend pre-orders in your neighborhood. Want to do consulting? Take on 2 or 3 low-cost beta clients and focus on results. Want to launch a digital product? Make the smallest version that solves one real problem and see if people will pay. Want to start flipping furniture, reselling electronics, offering bookkeeping services, tutoring, editing, social media management, car detailing, pressure washing, lawn care, video editing, email marketing, or online coaching? Good. Test small. The best teacher is not your notes. It's the market's response. A person can spend 6 months building a business idea in private and still know less than the person who spent 2 weekends testing whether strangers would actually buy. That's why small experiments beat endless preparation, because action reveals truth faster than theory ever will. Third, learn from people with actual results. This should be obvious, but weirdly, it isn't. A lot of people study money from people who are good at talking about money, not making it. They consume endless content about success without ever analyzing somebody who has actually built something concrete. If you want to open a business, study business owners making real money right now, especially the unglamorous ones. The local service operator doing $500,000 a year with solid margins. The niche consultant with 5 great clients. The creator who built a business around trust instead of hype. The small agency owner who understands sales better than people with fancy MBA language. If you want to grow on YouTube, don't just buy a trendy course because the branding looks expensive. Break down creators who consistently hold attention. Study how they open. Study how they transition. Study where they create tension. Study how they simplify complex ideas without becoming shallow. Study why people keep watching. Results leave clues. And often the people getting real outcomes don't look the way the internet told you they would. A lot of million-dollar small business owners do not sound impressive in theory. A lot of creators with massive influence never took a course about going viral. A lot of people with real money are not the loudest people in the room. That should tell you something. Reality does not reward image the way social media does. It rewards effectiveness. And now we get to the part that really matters. Do not use learning as an excuse to avoid reality. This is one of the most common traps smart people fall into. They keep learning because learning feels safe. Learning gives them the emotional sensation of progress without the risk of public failure. They can tell themselves, I'm improving, I'm preparing, I'm building my foundation. And sometimes that's true. But sometimes it's just a cleaner, more socially acceptable version of procrastination. A way to numb the anxiety of not making money. A way to postpone judgment. A way to avoid discovering whether they can actually convert knowledge into value. That's why some people are addicted to courses, addicted to information, addicted to self-improvement content, addicted to planning, and still financially stuck year after year. They're not learning to win. They're learning to delay the moment of truth. And the moment of truth is simple. Can what you know become something people will pay for? If the answer is no, then you do not need more confidence. You need more contact with the market. Learn a little, use a little, earn a little, then repeat. That loop is powerful. Learn a skill. Apply it in the real world. Get feedback. Adjust. Improve. Earn again. That is how financial capability compounds. And this applies whether you're an employee, a freelancer, an entrepreneur, or somebody just trying to stop living paycheck to paycheck. If you work a normal job, start asking better questions. What result do I create that is easiest to measure? What problems do I solve that save money? Increase revenue, reduce chaos, or improve retention? What skills do I have that could be sold outside my employer? What do people constantly need help with that I already know how to do? What high-income skill sits one layer above what I already know? That's how you stop being just a worker and start becoming a person with optionality. And optionality is everything. Because the real goal is not just more money, it's more control. More control over your time. More control over your choices. More control over who you work with. More control over where your income comes from. More control over whether one company, one boss, or one economic shock can wreck your life. That's why thinking in terms of earning power changes you. It forces you to look at your life not as a fixed identity, but as a system that can be redesigned. And once you start redesigning it, you notice something else. The biggest cost in your life isn't always what you spend. It's what you fail to build. The side skill you never tested. The service you never offered. The audience you never started. The product you never launched. The conversations you never had. The courage you never used. People talk a lot about wasting money. They don't talk enough about wasting potential income. And that kind of waste is much harder to notice because it doesn't show up as a charge on your credit card. It shows up as years gone by. So if you remember one thing from this, let it be this. Learning is valuable. But learning by itself does not guarantee wealth. The market does not reward what sits in your head. It rewards what moves through your hands and into other people's lives in a form they find useful. If what you learn can't be applied, can't solve a problem, can't create demand, and can't produce value, then financially, it may just be a comforting illusion. So stop worshiping learning in the abstract. Start connecting learning to money. Start connecting skill to outcomes. Start connecting effort to demand. Study how money is made. Study how value is created. Study why people buy. Study what makes someone hard to replace. Study how leverage works. Study people with real results. And above all, test. Because the person who learns and acts will beat the person who only learns every time. Not because they're smarter, not because they're more educated, but because reality trained them faster. So yes, keep learning. But learn like a builder, not a collector. Learn like somebody trying to create value, not just accumulate information. Learn with urgency. Learn with direction. Learn with the market in mind. And if you do that long enough, if you keep running that cycle of learn, apply, earn, adjust, and repeat, then financial freedom stops being some vague fantasy you talk about in the future. It starts becoming a path you can actually walk, one practical step at a time.